And of course the concerns of smaller parties. We have in studio with us now Professor Susan Booysen. She's from Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Prof, good evening. Always good to have you in studio.
Good evening. Thank you.
Now let's start with the latest, of course, the concerns by the smaller parties having sent a letter of demand wanting answers from IEC by 11 a.m. tomorrow, and if not so, they will take the matter to the Electoral Court. What do you make of that?
Yes, we've seen the resistance brewing amongst the small parties ever since, maybe it's coincidence, we don't know, but it was definitely ever since the results started flowing onto the boards. And also the sad reality that so few of the small parties, many of them very, very new parties or hardly political parties at all, but few of them will be winning seats. And just a little side note on that one, we see preliminary projections as to seat allocations, and it's even a relatively large number of them who will be winning seats. It could be up to about 17, 18, the bulk of them winning one or two, so the big parties taking the bulk of the seats. But yes, so it is in that context. It is inexperienced political parties, many of them, loads of them, have hardly been in existence for a few weeks, and have really come into being with a view to participating in this election. And they are suffering the consequences of not being grounded as political parties, and they are losing their deposits if they do not win seats. And then a very important part of this, yes, they have grievances, yes, things are not perfect in the elections process, and IEC people are, over the years, I've observed in this analytical way many of South Africa's elections, many other elections too, but in South Africa they're never perfect, and that's why there are dispute resolution committees, and there's a whole legal department, all of them deployed there at the Rock in Pretoria. And just this afternoon, a very good source in IEC told me they've got extra resources there, legal people, anticipated, because there are many parties, there could be more grievances, but these challenges so far have not in any significant way been channeled through the legal structures and complaint structures of the IEC. A few have gone there, but what have gone to them have not been of any exceptional nature. All elections have little problems. So we do not yet haven't yet seen the evidence that the complaints that are being registered are more significant, bigger than any other election in the past, because it's a vast infrastructure, around 23,000 voting stations, possibly at least 10 people employed per voting station, huge infrastructure and there are always things going wrong, always voting personnel that are not being trained sufficiently. And if there have been double voting in this elections case, I am pretty sure there would have been in previous cases as well.
Yeah. You know, Professor, some of these parties, well, most if not all of these 27 parties are now demanding a recount and a rerun. I mean, just looking at the scores that have been coming through, some of these parties have got votes which do not necessarily translate to even a single seat. So what makes you think that these parties, I mean, why are these parties so confident, thinking that if a rerun is indeed conducted, their fortunes might change?
I guess I hope that they'll get a few extra media interviews in the process. What are their big grievances have been, but they don't get media attention. But they've hardly been in existence, and they haven't done anything that puts them, so far, hardly done anything that puts them in the news so far. And I find very often the confidence that I see there is feigned confidence, or just sometimes, sadly, they're very inexperienced political parties that just haven't got into this thing of running in elections and of running the risk of losing in elections. And I find generally they haven't got, and I spoke today, yesterday, the last few days, to quite a number of the small parties there on the floor at the Rock. They really do not have much of a sense that it really takes a rugby stadium full, a medium-sized rugby or sports stadium full of people, like say Jabulani's Stadium or something like that, or Dobsonville. I think Dobsonville Stadium, Soweto, is about the exact size of you have to fill in order to get one seat in Parliament. So the kind of complaints they're bringing forward are really not the ones that will change results. But I do not think they have, at least many of them, don't have much of a sense of that.
Is it perhaps why the IEC, I mean, we've just had the CEO there saying that they will go ahead towards the announcement of the results, regardless of this particular complaint. So what do you make of that?
Usually there are some days after announcement of this result. It may be a final result, but in some ways it is also provisional, because there is still a few days after that in which disputes can be resolved. If there are disputes that are to be resolved, if they are of a size and scope that will not affect or are unlikely to affect the overall outcome of the elections, then there's no reason for them to hold back the announcement of the results.
Yeah, I mean, and also considering the fact that conducting a rerun of the election may be excruciating and minutely scrutinized exercise, and, you know, bearing in mind all the costs that may be involved, just how likely would that happen?
I think highly, highly unlikely, because in order to get a rerun, you would have to prove that it was fundamentally flawed, fundamentally corrupt, widespread corruption that will definitely has the possibility of changing the overall outcome. And this is very, very far away from that.
Okay. All right, yeah, looking at the screen, this is actually the predicted, result of these election by the CSIR. Well, it actually predicted of a 57.8% result by the ANC. Just how close or how far do you think they are?
They are pretty close. We can see their top line there, it shows 97% going for 98% of voting districts declared at this stage. And the results that we have so far are very, very close to these exact ones that we've seen from the CSIR. The CSIR actually yesterday morning, from around the point where 15% of the VDs were declared, we could see that these trends were stabilizing, and small variations, small fluctuations, but these overall results have been quite clear since then. What is still fluctuating, and that's fascinating, are, as the last few exact numbers of votes come in, the fortunes of the small parties. It is still uncertain at this stage exactly which ones will make it on a sliver of a vote right into Parliament, and there's a big contest at the bottom of that row of about 17 parties or so. I think 17 out of 48, that means about 30 of the small parties are guaranteed not to have seats. It's 27 challenging. It's not the exact 27, but it's pretty close correlation between those. But the contest between these small parties for one seat, we see some of the older parties like the PAC and the APC, Tembagoda's party, still coming in here and there with 1-1, but then Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party and the ASC, the Security Guards Party, and BLF, they're all there right at the bottom. The Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, not forget them, those four ones are right at the bottom of that list, and a few switches of votes that come through in the final results could very well determine which of those ones still gets into Parliament. But see, it can be a very different kind of Parliament. The EFF might not be the last of the rabble-rousers in Parliament once the BLF, etc., come. If they make it into Parliament, it can be a different kind of game. And I see also this protest. It's the first time we have this kind of resistance and protest against since the election results. It's also the first time that we have this large number of new parties in there, but it also coincides with a broader trend towards protests in society and protests existing as a parallel stream along with formal politics and elections.
Yeah.
So it is actually part of our broad cultural change in South Africa.
It will be interesting
it
to see
certainly
how
is.
everything pans out, Prof. We'll leave the discussion at this for now. When we speak to you a little later on, we'll be zooming into the provinces, the Western Cape province, Gauteng province as well. Those two provinces coming up here on The Globe.
All right.